guys, today's episode 5. Today we're going to talk about vibrato, how to build it from the ground up. Quite a few talking points. For the purposes of this video, we're going to only focus on one school of thought on vibrato. There's several different schools, several different ways to teach vibrato. We're only going to focus on one of them. It'll just make it much clearer and cleaner. We may touch on the others briefly, but we're going to only focus on one. Right away, the very first one is breaking vibrato down. Like, we're breaking it down to several different things. There's 4 different steps to this part. There's the shift, the pivot, controlled wobble, and then the actual vibrato. So for the first part of it, the shift, how I usually like to start vibrato out is teaching it via shift. So if we're taking, if we're focusing on, say, the 3rd finger, or let's take the 2nd finger, so the middle finger of the left hand. So to get that vibrato going, what we want to do is build it up from a shift. So we want to shift a little bit up, shift back, then a little bit down, then shift back up. So it's... And then once we get that shift down, we're going to do something called the pivot, where the finger sits solidly on the fingerboard, and we pivot the hand to simulate the shifting, but our tip of the finger doesn't leave. So it may look and feel very blocky and square. That's fine. We're in the beginning stages. Everything's going to feel different. That's fine. So that part is called the pivot. My finger didn't leave the fingerboard at all. It stayed on the entire time and just kind of rolled. But it was a very controlled roll from this to that, back, then to there, and back again. So it's very controlled all the way. After we get the pivot down, we do something we call the controlled wobble, which is going from a pivot to a more smooth motion, and you control it with a rhythm. So for example, I'm doing ba da 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 in my pitch. So that's a controlled rhythm. And I'll speed it up. And over time it should go into that wah sound. And you can keep speeding it up from there. And this is what we call the controlled wobble. You're building it up from a rhythm, the ba da 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 da, and to a wah, then da. And then you just keep adding the rhythm on it. And over time it should smooth out and you should have a really nicely controlled vibrato. After that, the last point is the wobble, and that's just your basic vibrato. So those are the 4 main subpoints to how to break it down and to learn it from the basic bottom step up, and that's the main school of thought on teaching vibrato. Now there's a couple other different ways to do vibrato. There's arm and there's wrist. Now what we mean by that is you either use your wrist to make vibrato or you use your arm. Most of the great violinists, modern and pre-modern, used a mixture of both. I mean, once you get a good vibrato, you can kind of mix the 2 techniques, but you have to know both of them in order to mix them. So with wrist vibrato, all it is just basically doing that, letting your wrist do the work. Your arm doesn't come into the equation. A lot of younger violinists learned this one. So, and it's a habit that I like to break because I prefer the arm vibrato. It gives more control. The arm vibrato gives a lot more control. You can have a thinner tighter vibrato when you need it, and you can have a more forceful one. With the wrist vibrato, it kind of is a little bit one-dimensional. There's not a lot of different there's not a lot of options with it. So for the wrist vibrato, again, all it is just letting your wrist do the work for you. So that's all it basically is, just letting the wrist do the work. If you're going with arm vibrato, you want the arm to do the work. So the vibrato is coming from here instead of the wrist. And that allows for a tighter, cleaner vibrato when you need it. So this is an example of wrist vibrato. This is an example of arm vibrato. And it doesn't look like a big difference in the arm, but it feels like a big difference. I'm engaging these muscles in arm vibrato and these muscles in wrist vibrato. There's another type of vibrato we can talk about very briefly. And this is what we call finger vibrato. It's where you just let your finger kind of sit on the fingerboard and move a little bit like this. So your finger is doing most of the work on this one, as opposed to your wrist doing it or your arm doing it. Your finger's doing it. So this one works really well with the opening of the Vinyovsky number 2, the D minor. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. It also works very well in 3rd and 5th position, where your hand is anchored against the instrument and you don't have a lot of room to move. So then that's where finger vibrato can really come in handy. Okay guys, that's the end of our video today. Bit of a shorter one. Vibrato is a widely talked about topic, but you know, when you really distill it down to its basic elements, it's really quite simple. It's distilling it to an exact science. Like, here's pivot. Well, here's first we have the shift, then pivot, controlled wobble with different rhythms, and actual vibrato up here. It's all about a process. And if we line up that process, we have the method. We also talked a little bit about arm versus finger vibrato versus wrist, and there's a whole lot of options in it, and it's really fun to look up videos and recordings of the great masters like Jaska Heifetz, David Oistrakh, Yuri Menuhin, and just analyze their playing and see what type of vibrato they're using, what type of bow control they have, what type of bow hold they have. Heinrich Schäring's a great one for that. Next week we're going to talk about shifting and how to do it cleanly and properly. So yeah, if you're interested and would like to learn more about shifting, stick around for that one. And in the meantime, thanks for watching, and yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching.